And then, even worse, he has increased his violent rhetoric, Donald Trump has, about political opponents, and in great detail, suggested rifles should be trained on former Representative Liz Cheney.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
I think Tyler is amazing.
And I'm a fan of this show. I've watched several episodes.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. You stink, Tyler.
Never promise crazy a baby.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Are either of you homosexuals?
I go both ways. What do you think?
You mean like flaming or?
No, we're not homosexual, but we are willing to learn.
But I do wonder, for others, in other cases, whether libertarianism today is just an excuse for many on the right to act selfishly.
Look at me. And then some fat asses in Washington started having opinions. The Olympic Committee started having opinions. You bitch, I know you. You started writing your opinions.
And it just makes me wonder, you're dead, bitch. You know, why are you doing this to this poor guy?
I don't care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is...
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
Oh boy, welcome everybody to LPR. This is Tyler Yonke. We have the one and only Dr. Jonathan Scriven. Welcome everybody. I'm just gonna throw this out there. You and I were going to do this, and you went from Facebook to Instagram, where I'm trying to connect with you. You're on there more than like some yoga pants wearing cougar, and yet you won't respond to me. What is going on? And welcome to the show.
Okay, listen, I apologize for taking so long, but yes, I've kind of been switching back and forth. But listen, I always want to talk to you. I love talking to you, and we haven't done this nearly enough. I don't know if people know the backstory. You and I have known each other for a very, very, very long time, although we haven't seen each other also in a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. You reminded me. Look, I had to reach out to you because we had to get you on it. You and I you've come into my show, the cycling podcast, which still kind of happens. But the Yankees played the Dodgers, and it reminded me, growing up, you were a Dodger fan. I was a Yankee fan.
Correct.
This was problematic. You know, we were friends, and you had lived there when we were really young. You moved away. You came back, and you moved away. Now you stayed away. Get away. Yeah. There's a long history. Are you Dodgers? You don't even affiliate there anymore.
I thought about that same thing because I remember being at your house. Okay, and I don't know if this was a visit back because you have to give me the year here, but when Don Mattingly hit like a home run in like 7 straight games, you remember that?
Yeah, I think that was I want to say 90. I don't remember what year it was. I just
so if that was
yes, I remember.
So
that, though.
If that was right after I moved away. Or no, not right after I moved away, but for some reason I was back and I was at your house in the midst of that. And I thought about that during the series. So I grew up a Dodger fan. My grandfather's from California. I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan. I live in the DC area. I grew up with the Baltimore Orioles now. So when I was young, I definitely rooted for the Yankees over the Dodgers. And it was so fun just to see that again when we were growing up, it seemed like every other World Series was Dodgers Yankees. And then we haven't had one since 81. So it was great.
Well, it wasn't that great.
Great in the sense that I kind of root against both teams now. So this was a lesser of two evils for me. I'm not going for the Yankees. Okay, the Orioles are in the Yankees in the same division. No chance. It's not like I'm a huge Dodger fan.
By the way, I just looked it up. Excuse me, 1987, 10 home runs, 8 consecutive games.
Okay,
he was the man. I mean,
so I moved away in '86.
Yeah.
So I must have come back the next summer. For whatever reason, I just remember I was at your house and it was in the midst of that, or that had just happened. I can't remember, but I do remember that.
Yeah. People are going to be like, hey, I thought this was about politics, about the election. Yeah. But you know what? This is, and I want to kind of get into this too, about like being so into the politics stuff. Yeah. Don Mattingly comes to the Yankees, his rookie year. They don't win the World Series. They're not in the World Series. They're not in the playoffs until his very last year and his whole career. And this is one of the best goddamn hitters ever out there. So I'm deviating. Look, you and I, we have a friend, and I think I mentioned this to you before on the 2016 election. Trump wins, and I'm watching this, and I see on Facebook, he says, I don't know that I want to say his name, It rhymes with Ronald Geisler. So he posts on there. I don't know how I'm going to explain this to my, I think it was like his 9-year-old daughter. And my thinking at the time is, why are your kids concerned about the election? What do you feel about that? I mean, you have kids. They're probably, very well aware of politics. Mine are too. But should they be so should they be so concerned about elections and the outcomes at young ages? And do you think it's good parenting to do that?
So let me give a little bit of background just for people who aren't
familiar
with my particular oeuvre, right? You called me the one and only, and I'm also like unknown. I'm a nobody. But so I teach political science. That's what I do now. I teach at a university here in the DC area. And so I talk about these, and I mean, my main area is international relations. I don't really do elections all the time. But
what's your education?
Sorry?
What's your education?
So I have a doctorate degree in international relations and a master's in history. And I graduated from Andrews University, that school, with a degree in history and economics, double major.
Okay.
So for a long time, I taught high school, right? Went overseas for 13 years, and that's where I got my doctorate degree, came back, and now I teach and do a variety of things here. But the question you ask is a really important one, because what I notice is a massive amount of anxiety and stress over politics. And I don't necessarily know that that's healthy. I don't also necessarily know that it's the student's fault, because society is just like hyper focused on everything, and we can get into this later, but these ideas about, is this the last election we're ever going to have? And, if you're not paying attention and understanding political history, and you hear that and you're 13, 15, whatever, that can be very stressful. So I do think it's a bit of an issue. It's one of the reasons why I think the more education we can have on not only what's happening now, but what has happened in the past, in terms of, we've gone through some terrible times in our countries, and we've made it. We've made it. We've had times when people say terrible things, and we've made it. So in terms of parenting, obviously, so I grew up with a family that was quite politically not active, but it was very involved. A story I like to tell people, you'll know this. You and I grew up in the same small town, and when we were young, the newspaper came in the evening.
Yes.
Right. And we didn't have, so I got scores from last night, almost 24 hours later. And I remember growing up, and I would run for the sports page, and I'd open it up and, read the box scores like kids, like kid. And my parents did something to me that I actually, I thank them for now. They started to say, they said to me, hey, you can't open the sports page until you've read the headline, every headline on the front page, just the headlines. And it's amazing how much information you can get from headlines. And of course, now here I am studying political studies, and I wonder like what role that played. But what I remember is that, every once in a while I'd read the headline, and then I'd read the paragraph underneath it, because I was like, oh, what's this? And then every once in a while I'd read the little bit on the front, and I would turn the page, and so I started to get interested in news and stuff. And I think for me that was very healthy, because even from a young age, I was sort of paying attention to what's going on. And man, this was the Cold War. There were some awful things going. We had nuclear bomb drills. And I didn't have the anxiety from that I see with students and kids today over not even elections, but even just what's happening today, or what so-and-so said today, or what so-and-so said yesterday. And this is a long, long way of saying that I think students and kids need to grow up with some sort of understanding, pay attention to what's going on, because I think that will help alleviate some of the stress and anxiety. But, it depends.
Could be. I think there is something about saving childhood too. And I mean, at some age, there's a gradation.
Oh, sure. So I see you're talking about really young, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, a 9-year-old, as an example, I don't know to pick that age. That's okay. So I do family law, right? I'm an attorney. I'm a lawyer now, right? And there's different ages that the court will start to listen to kids, right? 0 to 3, 4 to 9, and 14 is kind of this seminal age where you can actually testify and whatnot. So a 9-year-old's kind of just below that. And should they be so stressed?
Gotcha.
And that's kind of my point. And I think that is a society, maybe it's a school put in the kids had an election a few years ago when they were younger, and it's fun and games. But the friend of ours that was taking our kids to school, she was really insistent that my daughter vote for Hillary Clinton, as if that's going to make the outcome of the election. And then just like, who cares?
No, so if you're going to that angle, then I'm with you in the sense that we're putting way too much on kids. And part of it is because they're just exposed to so much more through the social media and whatever. But yeah, the idea that you have, I'm not sure how I feel about mock presidential elections in grade 3. Like I remember,
we did one in 7th grade.
I was just going to say, I remember Mr. Kruger. I know.
Yeah. Well, no.
Was it Mr. Kruger?
Anyway, the lady teacher that we had there.
Yes, you're right. Tammy.
Yeah. Okay. So we didn't.
Okay, I know you're talking about.
Here, but because I remember doing, we did debates on state, and it was like for vice, governor of the state of Washington, and I got all into it, and so it was so.
And then we also did one and we also did one for, let's see, we're revealing our age here, but yeah, this was like Reagan Mondale, right, or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did. No, I know, but
it couldn't have been Reagan Mondale. Well, it was
84.
Oh yeah.
We graduated in 85.
Yeah, okay. Good point.
But
you won Minnesota that year.
Yeah, by the way, Tyler. So here's a great example of what I'm talking about. In my class, right? This is for university students. I put up maps, right? We're showing them maps, and it's 2020 and 2016. And I remember, so this year I'm teaching a class that's literally called Elections 2024, and all we do is we're looking at elections, like objectively. Like we don't care about who wins. We're trying to say what's happening here, why. And I showed them the map from 1984 that has 49 red states and 1 blue state, and they thought I was joking. They said that's a joke, and I said no. No, it's not. That's rare. It's rare. 49-1 is very rare. But
you had times like that.
You did absolutely.
But that's kind of, you make a good point, which is, I'm sorry, say something while I clear my throat.
Well, that's fine. No, I was just the idea is it's just interesting when you talk about students that so this kind of goes to the point your question before. They can't. These are college students, okay? They can't really wrap their head around the idea of civil discourse. They struggle when I say, like, for example, if I were to say, hey, I'm going on this podcast with a buddy of mine, we have different political views and we're going to have a great time.
Yeah.
They struggle with that. Not that and by the way, I want to model that as much as possible. I want them to see that as much as possible because they are not seeing it on cable news.
No,
they're not seeing it on TikTok and memes where it's all about denigration and scoring points and owning the libs and doing whatever, and they can't comprehend the fact that there might be people who disagree, who can get along because so much of the rhetoric we hear is not that way.
I don't know about your environment, but so I have different groups of friends, right? And some of them are it's all in line, like my family. I'm a little bit of an outcast because I'm a libertarian, so they're confused, which I think most people are. And probably this says something about me too. But then I have this group of cycling friends, and it's a vast mixture, right? Of your lefty, your right, and we get along, right? We're cordial and fun, and we make jokes and everything. But there's an underlying base, though, of who we are as people, which I think really helps. So I don't know. So I get my point is I get a lot of different input in my life. And by the way, I used to do exactly what you're doing, but I'd do it with Drudge. I'd just look through there and see the headlines, and it's kind of like doing with it. But anyway, so I don't know what your take is with a lot of the kids. If your environment is, are you even subjected to? Because why don't you tell us where you sit before you tell us where you stand as far as your political stuff and kind of your basis there.
Well, yeah, well played. So I have a little story about that. So I live in a very, 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 very blue part of the world. I live in the suburbs of Washington in the state of Maryland, in Montgomery County. It's one of the wealthiest counties, but it's also a very, very, very blue county. So I'll give you an example of sort of the kind of environment I live in terms of driving around my neighborhood. I would say that in my neighborhood, the Harris signs outnumber the Trump signs 99-1.
Oh, there's a Trump sign. Oh.
Okay. In other words, Harris. There's
no, but I'm shocked. There's even a one Trump sign.
Well, I'm being generous.
Okay.
That's the environment I live in. Now, in my circles, however, my friends, I have lots of variety. Not calling anybody's name out, but one of my closest colleague at the university and I are quite different in our political views, which is great. I have family members who are on both sides, and in the middle both sides, and quite far out both sides. So there's lots of sort of opportunities for me to talk. In fact, one of the things I often crave is getting out of the bubble, because most of the friends I deal with on a daily basis are pretty much in line with my political views. And I sort of crave discussion sometimes because I don't want to just be in a bubble. The other thing that I get the opportunity to do that a lot of people don't get to do is I get to play devil's advocate sort of in my job. Like I get to go into a classroom, get a feel for what students are saying on a certain issue, and I can kind of play whatever role I want, play the devil's advocate. And so I can start engaging. So I have lots of opportunities to engage different ways on issues, which I am very happy about.
Yeah, that's I do almost prefer to, it's fun sometimes when you have this, your friends, there's the same stuff and you can bitch and complain about this, whatever. Yeah. But it does get a little tunnel vision. And I don't know about extreme, but it's easy to just start denigrating that other side without having to put up any arguments. I see this, in court or people online, they like to do just declarative statements, Trump is Nazi, Kamala is and then they don't use the word because, and then fill it in with some examples of what would happen there. And you have to, if you're doing it in good faith with someone else, you have to do it. I want to stop real quick. I think this is really important. David Brady says, what are your thoughts on Peanut the squirrel? I don't know if you know about this situation. This is harrowing to me. No?
I need to know.
Okay, this is why you're too much on Instagram and not enough on Twitter, okay? It's this guy saved this squirrel, I don't know, 7 years ago. Okay, he has like a rescue, whatever. The squirrel is in his house. It's a house living squirrel that's like a cat. He has like 1 million followers or something. It's a full-on pet.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
There's videos of him walking around the house. The squirrel like jumps on him and they're like kissing, and it's 7 years like this. He also had a raccoon that he had saved, and the house. You look at it, this guy is put together, and he and his house is nice. I'm sure the squirrel is potty trained. The New York came into his house yesterday, took the animals, and euthanized them.
What, really?
Yeah, like full on, like put him down. And I think he even did an interview with TMZ. And this guy and his wife is crying, and I'm like, we have 10 chickens illegally, 3 dogs and a cat. And, if they're not squirrels, I put those down myself. But if, this is your pet, it's, and right, it may be illegal, against the law to have those there.
I feel depraved. I haven't been following this story, but this sounds like a big deal.
Right. So it's a bit frustrating. It could be a bit crazy, right, with that. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting thing. That's kind of, I think, goes into politics. That's something, Trump, of course, jumped on this, did a thing on Truth about like, I don't know, saving the squirrels. I think the only kickback, the thing that's going to actually happen is this guy may be voted out of office that was, authorizing it. So I don't know if you have any takes on that, but it is an interesting microcosm of life right now. And is that going to be a big political? What do you think? Is this going to one party or another?
You said this is in. You said this is in New Jersey.
I think it's upstate New York.
Well, upstate New York. Okay, so probably not a swing because if this was in Pennsylvania, this could be big.
Right, but I mean, how many squirrel owners are there in Pennsylvania that may be swayed by this?
That's true. This is where I would probably come down on the side of a little less government, maybe.
Okay. Well, look at us making inroads. So and we'll get into this a little bit more here. But by the way, I have no plans or interest in doing gotcha or debate with this. I will say you live rent free in my head though, because I'll do bike rides and I'll listen to stuff, and I'm thinking like, how would I argue this with Jonathan?
It's the same way.
Yeah. So which is fun to me, and it kind of talks about the exact things that we're talking about there. Okay. So why don't we talk? Let me just say where I'm in. People confuse me a lot because I don't like the left at all, but I'm not. I have never voted for Trump. But they automatically think when you push back against the left that you are then therefore a Republican. But I have a lot of problems I got a lot of problems with the Republican Party too.
Yeah.
I just came from them, and I'm probably, I'm more aligned in that kind of mindset being a libertarian. What's your, first of all, why don't you define for me what you think a libertarian is?
Cynically or real?
Well, you saw my opening. You think I want a real answer?
So, all right, I'll start with my cynical. Here's my half-hearted view on libertarians. Libertarians remind me of the 5-on-5 basketball side, where there's one guy, every time the defense comes down, he goes and stands in the corner. And then when they get scored on, he complains to everybody that, hey, what's the deal, man? Where's our defense? Okay, that's my ha-ha joke. Libertarians, I think, want there to be obviously smaller government. I think very often they underestimate how much government actually they themselves use and need. Now, I'm not talking about little minute stuff. I'm talking about basic sort of infrastructure kinds of things. And I think generally libertarians like to use their position to argue that they are not for either political party. So sometimes I feel like it's an out.
Yeah. That's not so wrong. I mean, there's so many different gradations of
course.
Libertarians.
And I get that. Yeah.
There's your manner. And by the way, I think of it, I've really kind of come to this where I think of it as a legal philosophy rather than a political one. Everything based on, rights and what you have, going off of there. My morals aren't, dictated by law. It's my religion and my family and stuff like that. And I think their place is really local and influencing bigger parties. You can see this, the RFK, what he's kind of doing. He's not a libertarian at all, trust me. But he's kind of taken his position and he's coming into this party, the GOP, and he's able to get concessions, right? And I think that's, and Trump went to the Libertarian, Party convention, and that's kind of one of the things there. Now, is Kamala doing that with the neocons and Cheney? I don't know. So anyway, I just was interested in your point of view there. You're not completely wrong at all. Yeah.
No, and I'm also not, by the way, I'm also quite sympathetic to the philosophical idea of libertarianism. In other words, there's no hiding the fact that I'm a registered Democrat. I would not call myself a liberal. Yeah, shock. But I also am quite, I'm quite quote unquote libertarian on certain numbers of issues, including things like some economic issues. And I think there should always be people pushing to keep government as limited as possible. Now, we're going to disagree on where it should go up and where it should go down. And I'm going to probably have a lot of different views sort of in the aggregate from you, but also in some of the narrow areas. So I'm quite sympathetic to the concept. What I don't understand about libertarianism, and I mean this now, the political party, right? Let's say the political party. I don't understand how it would work. I don't know how it would work.
Well, you think it's working?
Well, no, I mean, I don't know how. So if a libertarian were to somehow win, I don't know how they would govern.
Well,
I do know how they would govern. Sorry, I do know how they would govern. The way all politicians do is when they have the power, they would love the power. I'm being a little bit cynical now, but that's my biggest complaint about libertarianism as a political party, not a philosophy, is I don't know how it would work in practice.
Look, you're not wrong at all. And I'm part of this party. I've really been kind of disassociated with them, though, who they picked this last year. I didn't go to the convention. I'm kind of like, I don't know where I'm at. Right. But a lot of the political philosophy or legal theory I am in love with, but it's not always the real world. So you can have that, and then you have to, how does that manifest itself out from the real world? And not only that, but what you're talking there, I mean, it's not going to be a party with any influence. By definition, they don't want to have power, right? So it just dissipates. And I think that's a problem. And the reason I'm even saying this is you made a mention there where, it's kind of an out. I think it's a legit out. When I took this turn, I suddenly had my, it's like a Superman, it's like a superhero type of feeling when you're reading the news. I see Ted Cruz and I'm like, oh, he's so full of shit on this. I see Biden, oh, he's so full of shit on this. And I'm not just going along with the wave that's happening because your party is saying that's the way it's supposed to be. So for me, that's been the best thing.
That's very interesting, and I totally can see how that could be somewhat liberating. Honestly, there's so many times because you're absolutely right. There are so many times. Well, no, I know. There are so many times where people want to say, "What an idiot, stupid thing to say," but they can't because it's their party. And I think, so I wrote something for a little thing a while ago, and I was talking about this the current election. And I made the comment or the argument, and I'm curious what you think about this, that both sides here, there is, for Republicans today, I think there's a good number of them who don't like Trump at all, but they just want to stick it to the libs. And I think on the Democratic side, you have a bunch of people, they certainly didn't like Biden very much. And I don't know if they love Harris, but they just want to stick it to the MAGA people. In other words, it's all about this group. It's not about what's best for the country. It's I just want to get them, and that's a problem.
It is, and thank you for starting. And look, you may have thought you're coming on here and I'm gonna tell you about how the elections are. There's so many electors and da. That's not what we're doing. So we're deviating, but you haven't. You're the only person. I will say this: you have an open invite. So anytime you ever want to come back,
very good
conversation. Yeah. So with what you said there is interesting because there's always a little bit of that. Like you watch. We love sports. I'll watch a football game, basketball, baseball, whatever, and I have no rooting interest in either one of these teams. My first feeling is, which team do I hate the most? Then I'm going for the other team. I can't help it. I can't help it. It's the way it is.
That is me exactly. In fact, I'll go a step further. I root for, when I don't like the teams, I root for whoever is going to be hurt more by the loss. In other words, whoever has the most to lose. So for me, the classic is Red Sox, Yankees. I hate them both, but I have to root for them. And every year, every game, I'll go game by game who I'm rooting for. It all depends on who has the most to lose. And that mentality is sort of what I'm talking about now. It's sort of like,
but I felt that. So growing up in the Northwest, as a Niners fan, but
remember of course.
The Seahawks were there. They were in the AFC at the time, and so there wasn't a conflict. I could like both, but I always liked the Niners better. Mm-hmm. And I could, by the way, everyone, I could explain my sports heroism stuff if you want to, but it all goes to my dad, and my dad had reasons. So now the Niners come into the same division. And suddenly, all these Seahawk fans, when the Seahawks were, winning stuff, they just they hated the Niners so much. I didn't have this hate, but when you say which person, the team, I don't know how you said it. Whoever would hurt the most. Yeah, I'm always thinking of the fans, and so that was 2016 when the election went. I didn't vote for Trump, like I said, but it happened. The meltdown. I could understand that. I was like, okay, this is so untenable. And then, shit hits the fan going forward. So anyway, what's any more on that? You said you had more.
No, that's just what I was going to say. Oh. It's the same sort of thing. I often think of fan bases too. Like, for example, so this is my, I don't know. We're going to talk about sports, but I can't root for the Dallas Mavericks and I can't root for the Dallas Stars because those are the same fans who root for the Dallas Cowboys. And I hate that. I can't do that. That's how visceral it gets for me. So, a lot goes into my sports preferences.
Okay. What do you think of this? So I dated a girl in college. She was from Southern California, and she loved the Dodgers. Now, when I say she loved the Dodgers, she knew the Dodgers were there. And so if she happened to baseball, I like the Dodgers.
Right.
I, growing up, hated the Dodgers. Up until it was the 11th, 12th time these two teams have met in the World Series. It's the biggest, World Series rivalry. You hate them. The Yankees, and you just hate them. She did not get past how I did not like them because she liked them. And I'm like, I would respect you more if you understood my hatred. Why is this not? We broke
100%.
Yeah, we broke.
Could not agree more. You don't make changes like that. I'm sorry.
No.
For a girlfriend.
No. What's worse? What do you think of this? And because this has to do with politics. A cousin of mine marries this guy. He's from Southern California. Okay. everything Dodgers, Lakers, it's all that stuff. They move up to San Francisco. He starts working at a famous college up there. He's now everything Bay. And this is as an adult. And I'm like, how do you start liking the Giants when you, I've been to Giants games and with a friend that had a Dodgers hat and they almost threw her off the balcony. I mean, it doesn't, what do you think of people like that?
Not a lot of regard.
Okay, so now let's ask you, what about the Cheneys joining the Harris campaign? How does that happen in a real world where people are okay with this? It's similar, right?
No. I mean, yes, for fun, it's similar, but sports is meaningless. I can
more realistic.
I know, but in terms of, this has been an unbelievable phenomenon to watch. Okay, I will grant you that. And there's a lot of background there. This isn't something that is just sort of the last year or so or last couple of years in the making. I am fascinated by which Republicans will deviate from Trump and which ones will not. Almost always it has to do with whether or not you hold office. Okay. Cheney at that point, when she came out pretty explicitly after January 6th, did hold office, and she lost her seat for what she did. And I think that's the part of Trump that is sort of unprecedented, is his ability to mobilize people against other people. I can't remember another Republican or Democrat who had the ability to, with the twist of his hand, get people to eviscerate people that they used to respect. Now, I think that's a flaw in the current Republican Party. I do think Trump, it has elements of a cult of personality. It doesn't matter what he says. There are a very, very large number of people who will simply do what he says with no thinking. And Cheney lost her seat because of it. What's interesting, what will be interesting to me, more interesting. In other words, I understand the Cheney's doing this. I believe that they think he's all the things they say about him, I believe that they actually mean that. I don't think this is just some political posturing. But what will be very interesting to me is what happens if Harris wins. In other words, then what with Cheney? Now there's talk about she's going to be in the cabinet. Now, to me, that starts to, really, Lynn Cheney, you're going to be in the you're going to be in the cabinet with Kamala Harris. Now, I understand why Harris is saying that, right? You're trying to appeal to the moderates. I get it. But I would be, I don't want to say surprised, but it would be quite a bit of a shock for me if all of a sudden you're seeing that wing of the former, or the Republican Party now working in step with someone like Kamala Harris. That's where we start to get into okay, was this maybe more than just something against Donald Trump? You're now just trying to get a seat in power. I don't know, but that will be very interesting to watch. Should it work out that Harris wins? So
you think this blows my mind? You think like a Cheney type of her and her dad are somehow swaying moderates? I mean, they're like the Lincoln Project spokesman types, right? I mean, the never Trumpers. That's really what they are. I don't see anybody being swayed by that. I mean, if you take back a little bit. I mean, there was a friend posted this on Twitter and it got millions of views, which is Green Day wrote a whole album about hating Cheney and Bush, and now they're with the party that is embracing them. This is wild. It's wild to me. Because these are, and Liz is a little different than her dad, but her dad's coming along for the ride. And I think it's just, he's the never Trumper, which is fine. But you think this is swaying anybody to come over? Other than, let me just say, there are people out there that hate him so much, that they'll switch parties or something like that.
Hate who? You mean?
Trump. Yeah.
Oh, no. And by the way, I think I said Lynn before Liz is what I meant. You're right. No, what I mean by moderate, so maybe I mean undecided. What I'm saying is I think there are still a fair number of what I would call traditional conservative Republicans, okay, in the line of Reagan, kind of thing, not the new Trump MAGA Republican Party, which bears no resemblance to the Republican Party of 30 years ago. Zero.
Right.
I mean, not zero, but you know what I mean. What I'm saying is I think there are a decent number of those peoples who likely would vote for Trump just because that's their rote okay, I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote for a Republican, but if they can see people who they used to admire, whether it be, someone like Liz Cheney or someone else, in other words, traditional Republicans, if they see them voting for Harris, I think it might say to them, you know what? Two things. One, that gives them quote unquote permission to do it. And two, and I think this could be big on Tuesday, there could be a number of Republicans who are sort of not the MAGA Republicans, but even though they might have been very conservative, but they're just not comfortable with Trump, they may say, you know what, we've got to bite the bullet this time to get this guy out of our face so we can bring back the republicanism that I remember when I was, younger. So that's what I mean by
McCain, Romney. Yeah,
right.
You had
in other words,
slew of amazing Republicans back then. Yeah.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is
I'm not saying it's you. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. But those are the kinds of Republicans who moderates, and I'm using, the words are, definitions are odd. Those are the kinds of Republicans that moderates, those are the kind of Republicans that could draw Democrats. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And so I think and by the way, the only reason I bring this up is because this election is going to be close enough that you don't need many. Like, that's why I think Harris is embracing Cheney, because if you bring over 0.3% in the state of Michigan, you win Michigan. I mean, it's that close. So that's why I think it's significant.
Yeah. So what do you think are the big issues that are going to be exit polling, the big issue that really spun this election? And is it is that issue, I don't know if you have any in mind, but let's say you come up with one, is that issue even being properly told? Because there's so much, I know there's a disinformation, misinformation, and I think this is why, I read your Medium stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
I go on there and check it out. And you wrote a thing about Trump, about, why they're still interested in him. I think one thing, maybe you do or don't take this, which is the way the media portrays from the right perspective is so much, I believe, lying or misinformation that they're like, you talk about, he's been, so many felonies and convictions and stuff. And at some point they're just like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that any of it's real anymore. So what's kind of your feeling on that, or the big issue that might come out?
Well, okay. So, I mean, there's obviously big issues all around. I mean, so obviously I think ultimately, not that anyone's going to say this is the big issue, but I think what may decide the election is just people. I'm going to pick the right word I'm going to use here.
Don't do that. Just throw it out there.
I'll just say people are thinking Trump is horrific.
Yeah.
In other words, I know what the issues are. Immigration is huge. Republicans want to push that. I get it. The economy, huge. Republicans want to push that. Women, and health and access to health, that's huge. Democrats want to push that. Democracy on the battle. But, when it comes down to the last few people who are making their decision, I don't think any of them are going to say, yeah, but Harris's farm policy views. That's not what matters. It's going to come down to a gut disgust or lack of for what Trump has been.
But that was 2016, wasn't it?
What's that?
Wasn't that the 2016? I mean, the most negative run, was Clinton was the most negative person, ever to run, but Trump was number 2. So it was just like,
well, so that, yeah. And by the way, what's very interesting, because you bring up 2016. So in my class, we've been talking about voting trends and all things. And so, my students are always saying, who do you think is going to win? And I'm not answering that question because I don't know. But what I will say is that Democrats counted on the fact that Trump, that exactly what I just said might happen this time. Democrats were hoping would happen in 2016, right?
Yeah.
The Access Hollywood tape, and no one's going to vote for this guy. He's horrific, and he's grabbing people's, okay. And of course, the polls, as you know, all showed that Hillary was going to win. I remember going on to one of them, 538 or something, the morning of the election.
You said 93% chance Hillary Clinton was going to
win.
The
morning of, okay? And so then, of course, what we know happened is that Trump won. And we can get into all sorts of scenarios. Elections are sort of like running those simulations of sports games. Like if you ran that election 10 times, Hillary would probably win 8 of them, to be honest with you. But she did. and the polls were way off. Okay. Then in 2020, when Trump lost, the polls were still way off. And in both cases, the polls underestimated Trump's support.
Right.
In both cases.
Yeah.
Even though it was a loss in 2020. Then 2022 comes, and it's the other way around. Remember, there was this red wave coming, like Real Clear Politics, which is fairly sort of right of center, I would say. They were predicting 31 pickups by the, it was 5. And so the polls were way off the other direction. And of course, this was the first election post Dobbs, and so women. Okay, so all this is going on, and so now, if you look at it just in raw numbers, Trump is in a very good position because if the polls are off the way they were before, he's going to win easily. But this is now this is 10 years of this, and I don't know if people are still going to just vote for him, even though they can't stand some of the stuff he does. And by the way, I did something for my class. I went back and looked. I wanted to see how many times polls underestimate the one party in a presidential election in a row. Okay, in other words, this would be the third. If Trump outperforms the polls, this would be the third time in a row. And since 1972, it's never happened. It's never happened that the polls underestimated one party 3 consecutive times. Now, so if Trump does that, it will be unprecedented. Now, Trump is unprecedented, so it could happen. I mean, this in 19, Nixon is Nixon, but he wasn't Trump. Trump is a unique character, and I mean that with all the sort of positive, negative things and connotations.
Yeah.
So when I say, so I'm not answering your question. Like, what is the driving issue? I'm suggesting it may not be an issue. It may be something just like, I'm tired of this. But if it were an issue, I think the two big ones, I think obviously on the right, it's immigration. And I think on the left, it's women and access to health. I mean, we know that in some ways you might argue the worst thing politically that could have happened to the Republican Party was getting rid of Roe versus Wade, because in terms of pure politics, not in terms of action. Because he's mobilized a bunch of people who, might not have otherwise been mobilized. It's that classic example where sometimes it's better to have the issue to run on than to have it solved, right?
Right. Which is gross, but I totally understand. It's a practical issue.
No, it is. It is.
So I have a question. As a valid question. I had responded to you on an Instagram post you did. You didn't respond. I was a little disappointed.
I didn't respond?
No. I
usually do. So I apologize. Okay, go hit me.
I know. So I'll bring this up, and I can't bring it up because the system I use in here they had a problem with slides that I had put on. But it was the bump stock ban that had gone into effect, and the Supreme Court had ruled against that against the ATF. Do you remember that the ruling?
I did.
So you came out and you said, hey, Clarence Thomas doesn't make sense because I don't remember the whole thing, but did you ever read the actual ruling? And the reason I say that is because this was an act. Thomas actually said, and I think it was very consistent with that in Dobbs, that Congress. This was an executive order that was put in. It was actually the ATF was putting their own spin on it, and Congress can act in that case to do something. So. How deep are you looking? Did you just read the headline? Do you remember this? Did you just read the headline?
No. So yes, I did. So I'm not going to be able to remember it specifically, but
I don't either. Sorry.
So let me tell you something about just myself. So, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I always read it. Now, when I say always read it, I didn't read the whole thing, but I try to peruse it. I read the bills. I'm not going to read just a headline. I don't remember exactly what you're talking about. I do remember. So what was the ruling on that? Was he the only dissent? Do you remember?
No, because no. On which? Because both of them were against what I actually have it. I think I could bring it up here. Let me do this. I could do it a different way.
Because I might be able to bring it up. Do you remember when that? I probably have it on my.
Yeah, I've got it here.
Okay.
There you go. I want to slideshow. Okay, there you go. No, that's not the one.
No, that's another one because that's one where
hang on. Sorry about this. This is how we make the sausage right here. So
yes.
straight. There we go. Now I've got it. Okay, let's put this back. I want to put it in a view that you can maybe see this a bit better.
Okay.
Slideshow. Okay. So you want me to read this? You want to read this? This is a bump stock ban. Striking down a ban on bump stock ban for guns is disappointing to say the least. But let's forget about. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading that. Forget about what actually a ruling says for a minute. We could go into that for a long while, and focus on the overarching philosophy behind the ruling and compare it to the Dobbs case that overturned Roe v. Wade. Oops. If you recall, the philosophical argument presented by Justice Alito in Dobbs and embraced by the conservatives is that the courts should not be deciding the issue. It should be decided by the legislative branch. Remember that argument? That was their justification for breaking 50 years of precedent. Just send it to the people to decide. Okay. And then you say, well, it doesn't apply for guns. So do you remember that now?
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not trying to gotcha at all.
Yes. No. Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't remember you responding, because I probably would have responded. But anyway,
then let's put it out there. There's the response. Basically, yeah, come on. So what Thomas actually said here, and I'll read this last bit of the quote.
Yeah.
In fact, Thomas stated at the last spot, Congress could have enacted a law that banned all weapons capable of high rates of fire, but did not. So the Bureau of Alcohol, ATF, and Explosives was wrong to interpret the federal ban on machine guns to extend to bump stocks. That's all I'm saying there.
Okay, so tell me why not, though. In other words, because a bump stock, tell me why a bump stock would differ from a ban on. In other words, what a bump stock does is make something a machine gun, essentially.
Well, I mean, it's they by the way, they went into detail about their ruling there. My point on on pushing back was this was in line, and it does push it back to Congress to make the law to do, rather than the Chevron deference type of stuff where the administrative state is just kind of taking charge in a sense. And I don't mean to really say, hey, you were wrong on this, other than how deep do you go, and then you answer the question.
No, I try to read, because partly I get to do that because that's what I do for a living. I read these sorts of things all the time.
This person makes a good point. Old hat, like an angry girlfriend. Yes.
But you said this. No, Tyler. Honestly, I did not see your response. I promise you.
That's how.
Because I know. It's because I have literally dozens of followers, Tyler. It's hard to keep up with all my IG followers.
You're doing great. By the way, I have a different Twitter account that you've probably never found, and I have quite a
I need to see that one though, because
it's like 2,700 followers, but it's not a lot. But I'm a little spicy over there, so you may not want to.
I like spice.
What I can't do is what you do here, which is engage in long form on Twitter. That just doesn't work for me. I don't find that that's ever useful. So I try to do snarky a little bit more than that. Like
I like snark too.
Okay. So as an example, the other day, Arnold Schwarzenegger comes out and he's like endorses Kamala. So I'm just like, I just posted a thing where it showed that his fact check about his dad was a Nazi. I said, oh my God, a literal Nazi endorsed Kamala Harris. Now, the crazy reactions to that are really what I'm looking for, which is, he's not a Nazi. And I'm just like, people.
I'm all for those. Listen, I should also say something else about what I do on Instagram. And by the way, I don't love that I do so much politics on Instagram, but believe it or not, and you'll notice if anyone, by the way, it's at, what is it? It's at Jonathan Scriven. I should have put my at instead of your thing. But what I do on Instagram, I have a couple of different things, and this is a subtle thing. If I ever if I ever tag my university, you'll notice those are very calm and tame because my university actually wants me to do that more.
Gotcha.
So like often, and not always, often I come on there and I can be snarky too on there. And often I will have takes, but very often if people ever read it, I'm sort of explaining things. Like one of the things I did was I was trying to explain what to look for when Biden withdrew. I said, now that Harris is the thing, here's what you should be looking for. And I talked about how in polling, there are polls go in waves. The first one you always look for is enthusiasm. Like you look for enthusiasm, then you look for the favorabilities, net favorabilities. And one thing that Harris did, and by the way, this caught me off guard, her net favorability increased so quickly after she took over. That was surprising to me. But then the third thing is finally, how do you plan to vote? And so, so you'll notice sometimes on Instagram, I'm actually doing things that are not too provocative because I'm then tagging my university because they will repost them.
Yeah,
so I'm not going to repost something with where I'm calling someone an a-hole or something. I'm not going to repost that. I'm not going to tag my university on that one. I'm trying to be a little bit more sort of down the middle.
Right. My wife's like, I don't understand. You're doing a podcast. You do this stuff on Twitter. Do you care at all about your children's futures? Like, they're going to be drummed out of society. And I'm like, I don't know. They'll change the name.
Let them figure that out. Let them figure it out.
I do want to say, I'm like, he's rehashing. I have a bunch of these kind of things that you posted. But one thing, some of them were things that we totally agree on. You're taking on Ted. By the way, Ted Cruz, this is an interesting fact. He's the one that got me to become a libertarian. And the reason being is I was like, oh, Ted Cruz, I think he's the guy I want for 2016. And then the whole Republican Party is going over to Trump. And I was just like, too many of his policies, I just wasn't a fan. Yeah. So I'm like, I got upset about that. And partly the reason I liked him, his wife went to high school with her. Heidi.
Oh, did you really? Because I knew she went to, was it Monterey Bay or something like that?
Yeah, so we went to high school together, and she was a grade behind us, but we had all the same friends. And she was a really nice girl, super smart, by the way.
Amazing.
Didn't date anybody, didn't have drama. So I liked her. But the odd part is I look at him now, and there's so much, I get disgusted with not just him, but just politicians in general. Yeah. So anyway, we have some agreement. You also did one that I went back and looked at because I was, it never left my mind. You'd posted on Facebook when Biden took over about the immigration. And you're like, hey, well, this is the immigration that's coming across with Biden. You can't put it on him yet. We'll check back later. And you were checking back later and it still didn't look good. So I'll give you credit for that. Have you checked back recently?
About which? About the number, the immigration numbers?
Yeah. How is it looking?
Well, a lot better than it was a year ago.
Okay. There you go.
A lot better than it was a year ago.
No, so I give you credit for doing that. So.
And by the way, the immigration issue is one we've been talking about a long time. So I'm sort of getting into the issue that you talk about in the Supreme Court. What's interesting to me about politics is there are times when parties want executive action, right? Solve the problem now. And there are times when parties will say, well, you can't do that by executive action. Only Congress can do that. And what is a little bit, I can be very cynical. I can be cynical. Is that parties tend to they only want congressional action when it's something they don't really care about. In other words, if they really care about it, the executive has to step in and do this.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to convey to my students is you've got to have some sort of consistency when you're calling for X action for one thing, but Y action for another. And it's simply based on politics. That just reeks of hypocrisy. And that happens all the time. And immigration is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, maybe I'll get you on board someday of eliminating the 14th Amendment. That's really my bugaboo.
Really?
Yeah, we could go into a great deal. And the reason the 14th Amendment is so wrong is that it led to incorporation of all the amendments. And people just go, oh, these amendments, they're meant for the states. That was never the intent. As you can see where the Supreme Court through the years, I think it was 2010, the McDonald case for the guns actually incorporated the Second Amendment. So what I mean by that is now it's to the states as well. Before, the idea was this is only something we could do with the federal government, which puts everything back on the states. And now you've eliminated a lot of this power of Congress and all this bickering, all this strife that everyone has that they're so worked up about, rightly so, because the president and the election means a lot more, and it never should have.
So you mean the entire 14th Amendment or parts of the 14th Amendment?
Well, the 14th, there's a lot of problems. What's the necessity of the 14th Amendment? And I say that
citizenship, among other things.
About what?
Citizenship.
Wow. I mean, you didn't have citizenship before 1865?
No, but citizenship is saying that you can't ban someone for being a citizen based on certain criteria.
Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of important.
I still think, well, then do an amendment that's just for that. There you go.
Oh, yeah. In today's political charged world, the idea that we'd get an amendment passed.
Okay. you're not, yeah, you're not going to get that. But I would say this, Dobbs, this is what I liked about Dobbs. Dobbs started to strip away at some of this unenumerated rights, substantive due process, even a little bits of the 14th Amendment stuff in there, at least some hints with Thomas, that I am in favor of. And simply because, think about this. Dobbs is maybe a little extreme for some people, but guns. California, if it was just up to them, they would ban them. Perfectly fine. And then you go to Tennessee or Utah and
do you think they would? Do you think they would?
Well, they have their own. Well, I don't.
In other words, to me,
theoretically, they could.
I know, but what I'm saying is, I think that's an issue where, in other words, people love to say they would do something when they know they can't do it, because there's no political backlash. And I am not at all convinced that even if the Second Amendment were to go away, that states would ban guns. I'm not convinced they would do that.
Well, they would have a tough time with how many guns are out there, right?
I mean, I forget the practicality. I mean, even sort of, it's just that, I
wouldn't even tell you how many I have just right on the floor behind me. You make an interesting point, which I think is absolutely true, which comes throughout the election. So with that in mind, Trump is a Nazi and all these other comments, he was in power at one point. Do we take into account what happened there, and is this rhetoric really useful? You said, things will never happen. Okay. I don't think he's going to declare martial law. Are there these? So if you say, do I think legit?
Is what legit? Fears?
A lot of the rhetoric about both parties. Is it even legitimate? So, Kamala, anyway, we can talk about the specifics, but, Nazi, fascist, those specifically.
Well, so define fascist. How would you define a fascist?
I would want you to define fascist.
Okay.
It's typically it's a right-leaning authoritarian corporate state combo, right? Where the state it's not the means of production like you'd have in communism, but there is this state and I think it's really what we have legitimately right now in the United States.
Yeah, but it's
not
also
jokingly.
Yeah, I know. But also
national.
Yeah, so nationalism is very important. Dissent is absolutely frowned upon. Press is something that is not validated at all. Threats against those who are against you in terms of politically, in terms of things like putting in jail or taking away their license if you're CBS because 60 Minutes was unfair to me. Now, I think the fascist stuff is probably a little overblown on some levels, but what I would always say to people is that it's not just the wacko left calling him a fascist. It's the people who worked the closest with him. It's not AOC. It's not only AOC calling him a fascist. It's not only AOC saying he's a pathological liar. Pathological. I don't mean, I say this to my friends, like, all politicians lie. No, please do not confuse Trump's pathological lying, where he makes things up. He says crime is up when it's down. He says we're in a depression when we're actually doing well. He says FEMA's not in North Carolina. Of course they're in North Carolina. He says I'm going to release my tax returns. He says I've never called for the repeal of Obamacare. He has hundreds of times.
He should.
And then that's another issue. And then, by the way, the reason it's pathological is because he lies about stupid stuff. Like when he says I was on Oprah's show during her last week. Why would you lie about that? When he says I was on the cover of Time magazine, so he's a pathological liar. But my point is, it's not just the left saying that.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think the rhetoric.
But I could. I'm not going to do it here because I don't have all in my mind. But you could say the exact same things about the left.
You couldn't.
Almost.
You could not. No chance.
Did you hear the clip I started with? Did he threaten, as an example, to kill or to put guns in front of and execute Liz Cheney?
Okay, I have the quote.
Start with the whole thing.
Yes. What do you mean start with the whole thing? He's talking about. I don't have the quote with me, but he's talking. So he was asked about the Cheneys, and he starts off by saying how Liz Cheney is stupid and dumb.
Right.
Okay,
Check.
then says she's a
Fact
warmonger, and then says she's a warmonger.
True.
Okay, and then says, what if she had 9 barrels or whatever?
No. You're missing one comment in there. What did
Okay,
he say
which
before
one?
that?
I don't have the quote.
He said, hand her a rifle.
No, not hand her a rifle.
Give her a rifle. That's exactly what he said. And Jonathan, we're not going to.
Okay, you might be right.
There's no way this is. He's talking about Warhawks. This is Fortunate Son. This is war. You've talked about the Vietnam War over and over. This is Afghanistan, Iraq War. Exactly what was said about the Cheneys and others. Bush, rightly so, which is. You don't have skin in the game, right? This is the age-old comment about that.
Okay, so here, so I get that, but in other words, I'm saying that's not the same as what Trump does. In other words, that's different than saying to the one political figure who he is very annoyed at, saying, "What?" I wish it. Let me pull up.
I could find it here. So
the whole
we'll get it. Let's see. No, I've got Peanut the Squirrel in my DMs in here.
I should have it, but I don't have it. Where I can't, because I'm using my phone, not my. Okay, but anyway, as you're looking for that, what I'm saying is this kind of violent rhetoric. I don't care if you're talking about someone who has put us in war. Why are you mentioning that about Liz Cheney, someone who has had almost no impact in whether or not we went into war? She had very little to do with it. She was at some point some minor assistant secretary of state. Why are you handpicking this one woman who you know is the bane of his existence and saying we're going to put 9 barrel guns pointed at her face?
Oh, come on. Let me ask
yeah, but where's the quote? Where's the quote?
Okay. Well, I'll do. There's these ones mashed up. I could get it here. Hang on. But they have stupid little.
By the way, I'm not saying he was suggesting she go in front of that she should be killed. And I know
that's what they're saying, though. You understand that, right?
Well, they're saying a firing squad, yes, but that's what the 9 barrel makes a reference to. That's not just some random number he picked. Like, let me ask you this: what do you think Trump meant?
You wait. Let's play this and then we'll see.
Okay.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her.
Put her there with a rifle, 9 barrels.
Yeah, but what's the 9 barrels?
Okay, let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face.
That kind of
the old war hawks, when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person. And I used to have...
I'm not a fan of him, right? But of this rhetoric.
I am 100% on board that they are taking this and they are using it politically. He did not say this is that, but the concept of 9 barrels pointed at her, that is the image of a firing squad. That's exactly what that is. Now,
I don't know that there's a standard for how many there are, but how many firing squads do you give the person that's going to be shot a rifle?
No, I understand that. No, I get that. But are you equating that with the examples that I've given you?
Jonathan, what I'm saying is you can go down the list of lies consistently from the left about him as well. And by the way, I don't care about him so much or her, but I'm just saying it's out there. Another one, maybe I should play the clip of the news saying there was the rally of the Nazis, 1938 at MSG. Trump is having a rally at MSG. I mean, is that a lie or is that just a really subversive way to project? It's ridiculous. Are you okay with that kind of commentary?
Yeah, but that's not a lie. Was there a Nazi rally at MSG?
When we go to court, they say you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So when you're implying that he's having a Nazi rally because there was once a Nazi rally in 1938, what is that?
Well, by the way, who was implying that it's a Nazi rally?
Let me go to the tape.
Go to the tape. I mean, if you're telling me some media member, I'm talking about candidates.
You don't think there were any candidates that came out and made that?
No, I'm talking about like Kamala Harris. In other words, so listen. So maybe we shouldn't get into a bag because I am all on board that there is absolute politicization of these kinds of things all the time. What I'm suggesting is that the suggestion that it's somehow the same on both sides is ridiculous. In terms of the candidate.
Let me ask you this.
I'm not talking about, I mean, Fox News.
I don't watch any.
Owes Dominion $700 million.
I know.
For a massive fraud and lie. That doesn't happen to all the other channels. It's not the same. They haven't been. So
I'll just, that's interesting. So are you a Me Too on court? In other words, believe all decisions? I mean,
what do you mean?
Is there any chance that a court decision may not be correct? Or are they all to
That's
be?
why we have the appeal process. Of course there's a chance.
Well,
Absolutely.
even an appeal, even up to the Supreme Court. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled incorrectly, I'm sure, many times as well. All I'm saying is just because there is a ruling, which I know we have to go with, they've been adjudicated, they've been held liable. I just, I watch court stuff because it's fun to me. I watch stuff on
what court? Which one are you
I'm
talking
just saying. Well, you said that Fox has to pay this amount. I understand.
They settled. There was no court case. They settled.
Oh, okay. They settled. Okay. Well,
no, they admitted I mean, it's not.
Do you believe all agreements?
I believe if you give up $700 million, you are in deep. What? That's what I believe.
I do think so. This is the problem, though, with cutting hairs around with everything, which is the elections. I mean, we don't have. By the way, can you defend? I don't know if you care to, but maybe this is just a little trivial thing. And by the way, you doing okay on time?
Oh yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Can you defend, as an example, voter ID laws without sounding racist?
Say that again. So can I Oh yeah, of course I can.
Not having voter ID laws without, saying like black people don't know how to get an ID or something like that, which is typically the argument.
So I'm not sure. So what I'm saying is I can defend someone who says we should have voter ID 100%. Without it being racist.
I am very confusing. Can you defend someone? Can you defend the idea of not having voter ID? Like in California, it's actually against the law to ask for your ID to go vote. Right. And that seems kind of crazy to me.
Okay.
Can you defend that kind of thing? Why wouldn't you have voter ID, just as an example? And can you do that? Can you say why we shouldn't have voter ID without sounding racist?
Oh, I think you can without sounding racist for sure. But
that's not, you said, I think. I mean, you should be more.
No, I don't think it's I do not think it's racist to say we should have voter ID. Now, having said that, I voted the other day and I was not asked for my ID.
But do you think that's something that we should encourage?
So here's what I'll say.
I don't know if that's a boogeyman.
And as a libertarian, I'd be curious about your response. Here's what I would say. I am generally not in favor of solving problems we don't have. We do not have a voter fraud problem in this country.
How do you know?
What do you mean, how do I know?
Well, by definition, fraud. If it's not being found, then you don't know that it's out there. It's like saying this policy saves so many jobs, and you're like, well, that's ambiguous.
So walk me through what the fraud could even be. So what? So let's say someone goes and they know my address and they go and vote for me.
Yeah, there could be fraud. You don't think there's ever voter fraud?
I don't think there's ever voter fraud that is of any significant statistical importance.
Okay, or maybe they're just. But how about this?
How many people would have to do that for it to be statistically significant?
I don't know. Some of these
thousands. And by the way, if I go to the voting booth and I'm told, "Oh, I'm sorry, you already voted," because someone did it for me, I have recourse. I have recourse. I can say no, that's not true. In other words, so generally speaking,
we have mail-in votes about, so it's hard to. My point is, you're acting like this is some hermetically sealed situation where they are numbering us off, all going into the place. We don't know because okay.
No, I'm acting as if nobody has. Sorry,
I'm just kidding.
I'm acting as don't tell my wife I did that, by the way. She'll do it. Yeah, I've seen that finger. I'm suggesting that there has never been any proof that it's a problem.
Okay,
that's what I'm suggesting.
By the way,
that's all I'm suggesting. If you show me, if you give me proof that there is mass voter fraud, let's tackle it.
I totally understand. There could be other issues that are voter. Well, I mean, it's tangential, like big. the one that's brought out, whether I don't know about this, but the Hunter Biden laptop, right? Suppression of being able to spread that around. There's been poll that said, oh, this affected X percentage of votes. Hillary Clinton, I just saw a clip this morning when she's talking about, the Comey letter and such, how that blew the election for her. It was quote, she actually said stolen from her. So are those significant? I mean, those are just things we have to live with, I think. Well,
so those, yes, I'm for transparency all the time. I mean, what's funny about the Hunter laptop thing is that the way it's portrayed, I think, by the right is not quite using the utmost amount of intellectual honesty, because the issue, I think, in other words, I think it was the New York Post who broke that there was this laptop, right? I think it was the New York Post.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And there was this idea that all the other newspapers were not reporting it. But if you actually talk to the other newspapers and hear what they say, what they were saying is, no, that we didn't verify it. The New York Post did something that journalistically is not what you're taught to do in journalism school, but they happened to be right. In other words, they went with a story without confirmation that happened to be right. And the stories, papers like the Washington Post, others will say, we had the same thing, but we didn't have confirmation, so we didn't run it. So I think that's an important part of that equation, but I certainly would want any information out there. Now, the irony, I think, is that what was on the laptop has proven to be kind of a nothing burger. What was on the laptop? Some porn pictures?
Well, he got indicted for basically some of that stuff.
How many years ago?
No,
in other words, what has the House kept telling us? We're about to break this huge story on Hunter Biden's laptop. I haven't heard anything. So the irony is it was kind of a nothing
stuff
burger.
there could be, but I mean, you see some stuff and not everything happens and you're like, okay, the big guy, there seems to be some influence peddling.
Sure.
And I think,
lots of innuendo.
By the way, I don't know if JD Vance, he says we shouldn't do anything about Hunter. Trump has actually said he would pardon him. So that's an interesting aspect there. And I don't know if that's because you just run in those circles and so you tamp things down. Or
I think it's projection. He hopes the same thing happens to him. If he loses, he wants to be pardoned.
Very well could be. So, but look, you talk about journalistic standards there, but, Steele dossier, Russian interference. I mean, there's running with these kind of concepts that the press does all the time without very much.
Well,
Adam Schiff, he's got documents to prove it. We're still waiting on those.
Documents to prove what?
Russian hoax, Russian interference. Sorry.
Okay, but there was Russian interference.
Oh, you're talking about a few bot farms? Is that what you're?
No, I'm talking about read the Senate Republican report that said the Russians interfered on behalf of Donald Trump. Now, where I agree with you 100% is that there was no evidence of any collusion.
Yeah,
I know, but there's a difference between between collusion, which is, and by the way, very few Democrats were using the word collusion. Some were. And the collusion is the part that Trump that no one has ever proved that there was collusion. Yeah. But there is no doubt that there was Russian interference. The Republican Senate has said, authored by Marco Rubio, said that there was Russian interference.
For what I remember, it was like $100,000 on some ads on Facebook or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's bad. But then again, you're like, okay, we don't ever have voter fraud, but we've got this. So, and by the way, fraud that's not found out doesn't mean that there's not fraud. It just means that you have
I agree. But we get into a very sort of complicated process if we're out there saying you have to prove a negative.
Exactly. I'm with you.
And by the way, so long way of saying, I think it's perfectly valid to argue for voter ID.
Okay, good. I mean, why is Biden not the presidential nomination?
Because he was going to lose.
Okay, so nothing to do. Why was he going to lose? It had anything to do with his mental acuity.
Had to do with his performance. Absolutely. So mental acuity. You can call it what you want. I'm going to reveal something to you now, and I don't know if you'll agree with this. I think who the president is overrated.
Right. It's proof right now.
Yeah, is overrated. No, but anyway, I mean, Reagan, there's all this talk about how he had dementia. In other words, what I mean by that is not that it's not important for for the image around the world. And so it's important to have a good leader. What I'm saying is there are very few, if any, decisions that come down to the president without massive amount of influence. So even if you do have a president who's not on the top of his game, I'm not as worried about that practically as some people are. Now, it reveals itself horrifically on a debate stage and when you're out giving press conferences and you fumble words and you forget what you said. So it was not a good look. And I'm sure there is some mental decline. There's no way you can say that Biden is, at least as he comes across on camera, as with it now as he was 10 years ago. Okay. And by the way, that's often the case for people who are 80 years old. That's not a problem. But if you ask me, why is he not there? It's because he was going to lose. And I'll say one other thing. The biggest strategic blunder Trump made was agreeing to that debate. And I wrote about it at the time. I don't know why you would debate somebody that early. I don't know, because 2020, we look back, 2020 hindsight, we look back, but all that did was give Democrats the option of getting rid of him before the convention. Can you imagine if the first debate was in September like it was supposed to be? And that was what happened? Yeah. It's over. And I don't know why Trump agreed to it. I know why Biden did it. He wanted to Biden's team was hoping that he would have a good performance and he could alleviate all those fears. And it was a catastrophe. I mean, It was a catastrophe. But if you remember, I remember Biden on like TikTok or something saying to Trump, "Hey, pal, anytime, anywhere." I forget what it was. And I can't help but think that that was a deliberate attempt to just get into Trump's like ego and bait him into debating early. But it was a huge tactical mistake.
It was. Well, yeah, I see where it was. He wanted to take the knockout blow, but
yeah, he wanted the knockout blow early. But sometimes it's better to just wear your guy down. And
right.
But anyway.
Yeah, it was. He decided not to debate at all for the primaries, just like Kamala.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't debate the primaries this time either.
No.
Is that at all a little concerning for you that she comes in, that it's just you just put her in place? I mean. Okay, not at all. You're good with that. Okay,
it's not at all, because I don't care what parties do to get the nominee, because ultimately, if they pick a horrible person, then they won't win. So intellectually, I wish there was a process, but I don't have a problem with a party deciding how they want which candidate goes into place.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we just say goodbye? Let me see. I had some. Israel, Ukraine. I read your Medium thing about Ukraine. I'm actually somewhat agreeing with you. I don't know if you remember that one Trump.
Oh, that's the one. Week. You mean a while ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Like
right
Trump,
when the invasion took place, almost. Yeah.
There was argument. The typical Sean Hannity thing. Oh, it's because Trump's not a strong arm.
Yeah.
And I think, the way that the U.S. projected themselves to Putin in a way that he was, I wouldn't say he felt provoked, but we're not going to go any further. We're not going to join NATO, and all these little things that happened with both parties ended up being the case. So maybe he was, I don't know if he was strong, but maybe they were all a little weak. I don't know. What do you think?
So, I mean, the Ukraine thing is very interesting, because what I think people forget about Ukraine is that they think Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
14.
Or 23, was it?
Well, no, you're right. But I mean, it goes all the way back much for
2008. 2008 and then 2014. Well, 2014, yeah. I mean, 2008 was Georgia. So, and, this idea that it only just happened in 2022 is, of course, incorrect. And what I would say to those who say that this wouldn't have happened under Trump, which, by the way, is a great thing to say for Trump, because you can't prove it wouldn't happen. That's why I always bait my friends by saying, yeah, but if Hillary was president, we wouldn't have had COVID. Prove me wrong. Well, it's a stupid thing to say, but you can't prove me wrong. Okay. But
you're right. They would have withheld that scheme.
Yeah, maybe. But what is it that Trump did during his 4 years to get Russia out of Ukraine? Well, nothing. Nothing at all. So, the idea that America is responsible for the actions of Ukraine is just an argument I don't buy on any level. Okay, and some of the people I really admire, some international relations scholars like Mearsheimer, among others, who I read a lot in grad school. He's a huge proponent that we have somehow provoked him by expanding NATO and stuff like that. And I'm sympathetic to discussions about that, but Putin is a dictator. I mean,
sure,
we're not dealing with a rational person. So I certainly don't buy into any argument that we're somehow responsible. We were somehow responsible. We, the West, not even the United States, were responsible for Putin's actions in Ukraine.
No, but at some point you don't need to be acting like you were and come to the defense, perhaps, of Ukraine. I don't know. I don't want to get into all this. The war stuff is fascinating to me. Growing up,
that's another podcast.
What?
That'll be another podcast.
Yeah,
do a whole international.
I'll just say this real quick, which is I've really changed my mind on like the war stance, and part of that was me watching what's his name, Burns documentary on Vietnam. And I'm watching this, and they start out with, here's the problems that's going to happen. So here's why we're going to go in to protect. You've been to Vietnam. You sent a picture of yourself drinking coffee there. And we're going to stop this, invasion from happening, and da-da-da-da. And then you have all this death, and you come out at the end, and you're like, and it happened. So why are we doing this? And it seems, so I have a bit of I don't know, it's not a protectionist stance, but it's definitely like, let's stop meddling so much. We do things, and I know everyone on the right got all worked up about TikTok and, Osama bin Laden on TikTok and, the reasons why, but there's some validity there of, when you go, if they're coming over to us and they're smashing us and we're getting bombed, there's nothing I wouldn't do to retaliate for my family. So you have to understand the concepts of that. And it's not just always they hate us for our freedoms. That's the dumbest thing ever.
So I guess, so what would be the alternative? Is the alternative to let Russia take Ukraine? Is that?
No, I think. Well, I don't. No,
okay.
I don't. At this point, though, it was inevitable that something was going to happen. Ukraine wasn't going to be able to defend themselves. Do we go in there and do something to put ourselves in the mix? I don't know.
Well, so far we haven't done that, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, we've been
at least not in terms of boots on the ground.
Yeah, I don't know. What's interesting, and we'll end it here, but which is, I think, and you talked early on, excuse me, about history and kids understanding. It's always fascinating to think that the history that happened is the only way it could have happened, and that there's little things that we could have done here and there to just change the course of history that would have been fine, right? Maybe getting into, involved in some of these wars would have been okay. We don't always know that.
No, we don't.
Civil War, as an example, maybe Lincoln doesn't suspend habeas corpus and invade the South. I don't know. Maybe it would have been okay.
History repeats itself, as I always say, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
In other words, just because something happened one way in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen the same way in the future. I mean, that's something, but it's important to know what happened so you can at least have a educated opinion about what options you have in front of you.
I agree. Any last things before we head out? Anything you want to?
No, just that this was super fun. So actually, Tyler, I thought I was coming on. I didn't know you had this. I haven't looked at this podcast. I've only seen the one on the cycling stuff. So I gotta this is crazy.
Look at this.
No, I'm getting on this one because
so what I typically what I started to do was I loved talk radio growing up. Well, not growing up. I'd get in the car and my dad would have used it and all of a sudden the AM radio and what the heck, and then I enjoyed it. So I don't want to do talk radio, and I was like, I want to talk about politics. Cycling was in there, and I wanted to talk about politics. So I'm like, what can I do? So I started to do review podcasts, libertarian podcasts. Can you be more niche on that? And then it's kind of worked away from there. I do legal stuff and just do my own analysis thing. And you may or may not want to do it because I'm pretty out there, as you.
I don't mind. I like it. No, I'm happy with this. I'm glad. I'm thrilled to find out about this.
So that's my deal. By the way, you're welcome back anytime. We will talk because a few weeks ago I went to Kill Tony Hinchcliffe. I went to watch his comedy. Absolutely hilarious. I didn't have any problem with what he did at Madison Square Garden, except for that he probably should not have been the person there. He does roast stuff all the time. I did not think that saying Puerto Rico was a garbage place was any worse than saying California is a garbage place. But here we are. And this is where you have to be sensitive. Last thing I'll say is none of these parties are smart. So I'm fine with this this burn it down crap because it shows, I think it emphasizes the crap that we have to vote for on both sides. And when we stop acting like they are above it is when they destroy us. What do you think?
So I don't quite share that exactly, because I think there's clearly, sorry, I think there is clearly one candidate here who is a far better choice, almost excluding policy. In other words, my big contention with Trump is not so much politics, even though, by the way, here's a guy who Republicans are going to vote for who's pro-tariff, who has no idea what he thinks about abortion. He has zero concept of what he thinks about that sort of thing. So, but he as a person is to me is he has disqualified himself so many times for even running for this office, including the stuff he has done in the last 24 hours. Wow. Okay, this morning, I mean, what he did to the microphone, are you kidding me? I don't know if you've seen that yet.
No, I got to go check it out now.
You got to go check it out, okay? But
pins and needles.
Pins and needles. Okay, he's upset at the microphone, so just it's not. It's
that
just
where
like
it looked like he was.
Yeah, well, it didn't look like he was. There was an implication, but I mean, and I'm just like, we can do better than that. And what I want, and here's what else we certainly can. You don't think we can do better than Donald Trump?
No, you don't separate these two. I'm sorry. She is vacuous intellectually. She was out here in California. We've known about her for a long time. There's nothing intellectually stimulating. We have degraded.
I'll take that, Tyler. I will take that.
That you
Trump
shouldn't take it.
Is unbelievably unfit to be the president. He has demonstrated that. I mean, if you don't think it matters that he tried to overturn the election, that he sat in his room. You don't think that's important?
I'll just say no.
3.5 hours while police officers are being beaten, and he did nothing. Please.
Please. And here's the reason I say that. I remember where I was watching this. I'm at my office. I'm at my desk, and I'm watching this. You're not going to like this. As an old man myself, as you are in their 50s, I laughed. I laughed at it, and the reason was we were not allowed to go outside. We were not allowed to do anything that summer. The riots were happening. They were coming up to our house. The downtown Sacramento was just a shit show, and everyone was fine with that. The federal building in Portland was destroyed. And then I'm like, oh, now the other side's doing it. This is where we are as a nation. So I didn't take it seriously. And I know you have vaunted ideas about this. I've gone way below that. I'm like, it's not interesting to me. I mean, it is, but it's more humorous.
So it's okay. So that's a huge area where we differ. This was the integrity of a national election at our national house. It's not the same. I'm not defending on any level anything else, but to think that this guy deserves a chance to do that is, unbelievable. And Trump, so he's a narcissist. Everything's about him. Everything's rigged.
I understand. I understand all this.
So I'm saying so Harris, as bad as Harris is, she is bad within the framework of normal political discourse.
I don't know about that.
What is something about Harris that is outside of the box of a normal political candidate? Because here's what she doesn't do. She doesn't ever say everything's rigged against her. She doesn't say that our allies are worse than our enemies. She doesn't grift and sell crap to make a buck and then overcharge the Secret Service for hotel. What Donald Trump does is so outside the bounds of anything normal that to me, there's no connection here between the two choices. Now, okay.
We've determined this, and we did this earlier talking about sports, which is you and I hate people, and we're going to vote against. I don't know who I'm voting for. Actually, it doesn't matter in California, and it probably doesn't matter where you're at either. So
no, it doesn't. We have an interesting Senate race, but
yeah, that'll be the interesting. Okay, we'll cut it out at this point.
Okay.
Where can people find you, Dr. Scriven?
So at Instagram, Medium, just my name, Jonathan Scriven. I don't do a ton, and I'm sort of tongue in cheek. I don't do it quite. I'm not doing anything like this. This is awesome. I love this. Anyway, I love the discourse, and I like chatting with people who are push me and whatnot. So loved it. Thank you.
Okay, No problem. Everybody, I know there's people in the chat. They like you. They don't like you. I don't know. I wouldn't read it.
Hey, no, I want it. So how do I read it? No, I'm all for reading it.
Well, you can go back into I'll send you the link for the actual where the show is. You can go in there and cry yourself a little.
Good. I'm happy to do that.
Big thank you for coming on. I hope you're still riding your bike. People, they make fun of me for bike riding, by the way. So it's the
I haven't been doing it as much because I'm in a too suburban area.
Cycling and libertarianism don't mix for some reason. Oh, you're not doing it enough? Sorry about that.
Not as much. I should.
All right.
Hey, appreciate it. Fun.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. We're going to go out down here. We'll do this one. Lester Holt. Thanks, everybody. See you. Bye.
Let me just caution the audience. Let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please, keep restraining yourselves, and would be helpful so we can hear the candidates, because these are important issues and the voters want and need to hear.